What's up, guys? My name is Aaron Young. I'm a photographer from North Carolina, and this is going to be my first lens review and my first YouTube video in general, so we'll have to get the bugs worked out as we go. I'm sure this first video is going to be kind of all over the place, but I just want to talk about a lens that I think is criminally underrated, and that is the Canon 28-80 f2.8-4 L lens. Now, this lens is one of the first generation Canon lenses for the EOS system, and it's one of the first L lenses for the system as well. Came out in 1989. Now, if you were in the market for an L lens on a budget, or if you just wanted to replace your kit lens, you'd probably find yourself pretty intimidated by the high prices of some of the newer models, and also a lot of the more popular models like the 24-70 2.8, or even the slightly older 28-70 2.8. That one still fetches a decent price. If you go on eBay, you're going to find most of those lenses for at least $500 if they're in really good condition. And of course, trust me when I say you don't want to buy a lens that's not in really good condition if you're going to be using it for work. I mean, if it's for fun, that's different, but for me, I actually am a working photographer, so I need really good gear, so I have to buy top of the line if I can find it, especially for my budget. So when you compare price to those, this guy comes in. This is the older predecessor to those 28-70s, 24-70s, and even kind of the 24-105 f4. This one I picked up for, I think, about $280, which the crop sensor lenses, like the Canon EFM lenses, or not, EFS lenses, are, a lot of those go for that new, and they don't let in, like, they let in at the most 3.5, and that's at the wide end. This lets in 2.8 at the wide end down to 4 at the telephoto end, which is not too bad. I mean, it is a varying aperture, but when it comes to letting in that much light on a zoom lens, I am not inclined to complain too much about that, because if I really need a 2.8 all the way through, I might just go ahead and get an 85mm 1.8 prime lens at that point, or even a 1.2 if I could afford it. Or get a 70-200. Now, when I picked up this lens, the first thing I noticed, and the first thing you're probably going to notice, is the build. This thing is heavy. I mean, this thing is a absolute tank. And I mean, when I say that, I mean seriously. This lens, I don't know exactly how much it weighs, but it's actually the heaviest lens I've got. And I've also got an 80-200 f2.8L. Which I'll talk about at a later date, most likely. If these lenses are close to the same weight, it's very close, but I'm pretty sure this guy is actually heavier, and it's a decent amount smaller, but it's very thick. It's a thick boy. But the build quality is absolutely fantastic. This is actually the only lens I've ever dropped. Hopefully it stays the only lens I've ever dropped. But that is something that I think is kind of an inevitability with photography, is you're going to drop something in your bag at some point. You're going to be getting it out too fast or something. You're going to end up dropping it. So the fact that the lens was what I dropped, I was terrified. Like, it fell. I mean, this thing fell about 4 feet out of a truck to the concrete ground. I was doing a car shoot, and it smacked the concrete like this, like hit right there. It, let's see, yeah, this lens cap has a big scuff in the side. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but it, this is the lens cap it fell on. It landed cap first, then bounced onto the zoom ring, and now the zoom ring does have, you might be able to see it if it focuses closely. I'm not sure if it'll focus that close, but there's a little chip right there on the zoom ring. And if you look at the ring from this side, you can see it's got like a little misshape in the circle. But that was the only damage it sustained. No glass crack, no effect to the autofocus performance. I tested the focusing against a flat wall, and it seemed to still focus properly like it should. But yeah, I was just really glad that it was, if it was going to be something I dropped, I'm kind of glad it was this, because this thing is a tank. The only probably downside to the build quality on this lens is the zoom ring is plastic, and the it does when you're focusing, not when you're zooming. I'm sorry, the focusing ring is plastic, not the zoom ring. Now, when you are focusing, it is a focus by wire, which is, some people don't like that, especially because it means you can't manually focus without power. So if it failed, you would have an issue down the line. But honestly, with how reliable these lenses tend to be, and there's not a lot of information on them online, but if you do find information, most people seem to have nothing but praise about this lens. So I don't see many people having failures with these lenses unless you're really abusing them. The zoom is self-contained. The focus is not. That is this guy right here, which I'll show you in just a second. It does have a USM, so it's relatively silent. It's not as quiet as an STM, but if you're doing video and you have the camera and the microphone separate, like if you have the mic off the camera, or if you're just really good at sound deadening, you can get rid of that. But you can hear it in a standard video if you're autofocusing with it. But for me, that's not really an issue. I'm mostly doing photography, and that's what I really wanted this lens for. This lens is not something I would personally use for video because it doesn't have image stabilization. And with the weight of it on the front of my camera, which the primary camera I use right now is an EOS M5, for handheld video, it's a little bit of a pain anyway. So I would not recommend it as a video lens unless you plan on doing tripod mounted work or you're not recording audio, let's say that. Now, let me show you how this focusing system works, actually, because I'll put it on my EOS 650 for reference, or EOS. I don't know, some people call it one way, some people say the other. So we'll put it on this for reference, and I'll show you how it focuses. So, put the cap back on so that she goes all the way through, and you'll see that when I focus, it does rotate. That is one big downside to this lens, is the end of it does actually rotate when it focuses. So a lot of people don't like that, but honestly, it's never been an issue for me. If you're using polarizers, it will be a little trickier because, you know, obviously you'd have to focus, then rotate your polarizer to adjust for that. But in most circumstances, it's not really a big deal, especially if you're doing like street photography. And if you're worried about protecting the front of the lens since it does rotate, I would just get the lens hood, which this is a Canon ES79. It's you can get aftermarket versions of it. This one just happened to come with the lens, and it's just an old school click-on lens cap. No pedal, just the older style, bowl style. I personally love the way these old style lens caps look. Just as a side note, I think they look. I think they kind of make it look like a bazooka or something. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it definitely isn't going to be the most subtle setup for street photography if you've got the lens hood on there. But I will say one thing is, even though the focus is focused by wire, and it's focused by wire from 1989, it's actually really smooth. Like, I love the manual focus on this bad boy. Let me turn the camera back on, otherwise you won't get that effect, will you? But I love the manual focus on this thing. It's very, to me, it's very responsive, pretty quick, very smooth, and precise. Like, I have never had a problem manual focusing this. Now, I mostly use autofocus, but if I need manual, it's good to know that I shouldn't have a problem with it, you know what I mean? Now, the image quality is another thing. I didn't know what to expect with this lens because most of the people who've talked about this lens, they talked about it on like old blogs and stuff like that, and you don't see a lot of recent information on it. Let's just say that. I mostly found my information off of old websites. So I wasn't sure what to expect with image quality, and I was very happily surprised. It's fantastic. I mean, for the price and for the age, I couldn't believe how nice it was, especially considering I use an EOS M5 with a Viltrox speed booster. Now the Viltrox, of course, is known to not be as high quality as the other option, which is the Metabones. So you're supposed to be losing a little image quality, and even through that, it works perfectly. And the speed booster is also known to not work with some lenses, but this one it works perfectly with. I've never had a crash or a lockup through my camera with this lens. So that means if you are using a third-party adapter for any camera, you might even be adapting EF lenses to Sony. I don't know. You probably won't have any issue. I can't guarantee that because I've not tried them all, but if it works with the Viltrox speed booster, which is kind of known for having issues, I can't imagine it wouldn't work with other setups. Now, I'm trying to think if there's any cons I'd really have with this lens. Now, of course, there are the cons I already pointed out. There is the focus by wire, which, like I said, to me, it's not really a con. There's also the fact that the focus is not self-contained within the lens body. Those are really the biggest things. Maybe there's some vignetting at the wide end, and you know, there might be some softness when you shoot wide open, but for a lens from 89, and considering it is sharp in the middle, it's honestly pretty much exactly what I would have hoped for a lens like this for the price. Like I said, I paid just under $300 for this thing in mint condition. Not mint anymore with the dent in the side, obviously, but that's we'll gloss over that. We'll forget about that. Once you stop it down, if it's, you know, if it is too soft for you at 2.8 or at 4, which is at the long end, once you stop it down, I usually shoot with this lens at about anywhere between f4.5 and f5 typically when I'm just running gun shooting. But if I've got plenty of daylight, I'll stop it down to f5.6, maybe f8, and it's razor sharp at that point, at least to me, to my eye. I'll put up some pictures. Other things like using this thing out in the real world, it's not weather sealed. Okay, so if you wanted a weather sealed lens, you might have to go for one of the newer short zooms, like a 28-70 or 24-70 2.8. I don't know if the 28-70 is weather sealed, but I know that this one's not. So if you need weather sealing, you might need to look elsewhere. But I have used this thing in some rainy climates and situations, so I haven't taken it out in a torrential downpour, because personally I don't like to be in the rain, so I'm not trying to shoot in the rain if I can avoid it anyway. But in the rain I've shot with, which is probably like, you know, just kind of a sprinkle, the lens will get wet down the top, it won't get soaked. It's never given me any issues. I've used it all through those events. I've used it in the winter when it's real cold and everything, and it's never given a problem. I think I shot with it while it was snowing this past winter, which I mean, snow's not a big deal if you keep it wiped off, but still some of it melted and got on the lens, but no issues for me. The biggest thing for me, the biggest comparison I'd say this lens goes for is not going to be the 24-70 2.8, just because that is a faster lens all the way through the range. If you're really going to compare this lens, I would compare it to the 24-105 f4, which is kind of a kit zoom lens. Like, it's a kit L lens, basically. It's a nice lens, and it's probably one of the better deals you're going to get on an L lens. But I would say if you're looking for a good alternative to that lens, and one that not a lot of people have heard about, I'd go for this guy, because honestly, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, the image quality is better with this one. The distortion doesn't seem to be as bad with this guy. It does have some distortion, of course, barrel, and I believe when I go in to 80, it turns into a little bit of pincushion, but it's not very noticeable, and super easy to correct in post. I just edit with Lightroom most of the time. So if you're worried about distortion, stuff like that, I'd probably go with this guy over the 24-105, because from all the reviews I've seen, that thing actually has some pretty serious distortion at the extreme ends of it. But if you need that extra reach, of course the 105 is not going to be compared to the 80. But if you're just needing a good walk-around zoom lens that lets in a decent amount of light, I would personally recommend this guy. It has served me quite well. Like I said, I've abused the crap out of it, and it's never given me a problem. So I would definitely take a look at this if you're interested in either obscure L lenses or you need a really good deal on a good lens. I have this lens is always going to be in my bag. I don't think, unless I was to replace it with a newer lens, like maybe for the R system or something, I think this lens is going to be the one I stick with if I'm sticking with EF lenses for the time being, because it's a fantastic lens. And like I said, I just wanted to make a short video on it because I don't think there's a lot of recognition for this lens out there. I felt like this lens needed to be reviewed and recommended or not recommended for people so that they could see whether or not they wanted this lens. So if, like I said, if this video helped for you, feel free to leave a like, maybe subscribe. I'm going to try to start doing more content on this channel. I'm mostly a photographer, so my videos are probably going to be a little rough for a little while, but hopefully that starts to pick up. I would like to start getting more into video, and I would like to, at the very least, talk about some gear that I think is highly underrated, especially for the Canon system. Now, I do also shoot a few other systems, so I will be talking about those as well. But this was just a good starting point for me. It was something I was thinking about talking about. So if you enjoyed it, like I said, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and comment. Feel free to critique my video work. Tell me things I can improve on. Feel free to recommend things. Just keep it polite, please. And hopefully, I'll see you guys next time.